Antonio Brown and Ben Roethlisberger made beautiful magic together as the league's most dynamic aerial connection for upwards of a half-decade. Then, all of a sudden, the two Canton-bound superstars just couldn't play nice. This is the inexplicably stupid history of their beef. The Pittsburgh Steelers drafted Ben Roethlisberger 11th overall in 2004, and he provided immediate dividends, taking over as starting quarterback in Week 3 of his rookie season and setting an NFL record by winning each of his first 14 career starts and guiding his squad to the AFC Championship game. He won Super Bowl Extra Large for an encore, becoming the only quarterback to ever hoist the Lombardi Trophy before blowing out 24 candles. In the ensuing years, he'd break every meaningful franchise passing record, get a 9-figure contract extension, and win another Super Bowl in February 2009. He was an established, bona fide superstar going into his 7th season in 2010 when the Steelers used a 6th-round pick on a little-known wide receiver out of Central Michigan named Antonio Brown. By year 2, he'd burst on the scene, teaming with Mike Wallace to form one of the league's top receiving duos, leading to a lucrative 5-year extension after just his 2nd season. Once Wallace left for Miami in 2013, Brown and Ben set fire to the entire NFL, and by the time the dust settled on the 2016 season, Brown had posted the most prolific 4-year receiving stretch in the history of the game. That led to another big money extension ahead of the 2017 season, which definitely seemed to cement his status as a Steeler for life. The first few games that year were business as usual, but then came a Week 4 trip to Baltimore, when Brown broke wide open for what would have been a huge 3rd down play, only for Big Ben to never even look his way. Brown threw a temper tantrum, taking his frustration out on this poor cooler. Then a couple days later, when Ben was making his weekly radio appearance, he threw his wideout under the bus for creating a needless distraction, explaining that it's not like I intentionally didn't throw it to him. I was doing what my reads tell me to do. I don't even want to say I made a mistake because I was reading the side I was supposed to read. It's just unfortunate that it happened, and it's unfortunate that he acted and reacted that way. You see, over the years, Roethlisberger has consistently gone on the radio and aired team dirty laundry on a public platform, and it's pissed off a whole bunch of his wideouts. After Emmanuel Sanders left Pittsburgh to sign with the Broncos, he went out of his way to note how much better of a leader Peyton Manning was than Ben Roethlisberger, and noted his discussions with Wallace on the topic of Ben calling teammates out on the radio.
I said if Ben called me out on a radio show the next day, I would literally walk up to him in the locker room and say, hey, man, don't do that. Keep my name out of your mouth.
Legendary Steelers wideout Hines Ward also voiced similar beliefs regarding Ben's leadership as it pertained to those radio segments.
I just think he has to take the initiative to kind of do more as a leader, not just being able to call guys out on his radio show. You don't have to air it out to the public where everyone can hear.
Things were at least fine on the field throughout 2017. Brown notched his 5th consecutive All-Pro season as the Steelers won 13 games and repeated as division champs. But 2018 represented a huge fork in the road for the organization. With Roethlisberger aging and star running back Le'Veon Bell on sabbatical, their window to contend was diminishing. They kicked off the season by failing to defeat a Browns squad who had lost 34 of their previous 35 games. So tension was already high when they welcomed Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs to the big ketchup bottle. Near the goal line, down 12, with just a couple minutes left, Brown expected and wanted that touchdown, but Ben had other plans and was able to scramble for the TD. Brown was irritated even though his team, scored. They'd ultimately come up short, and about an hour and a half following the game, a tweet from a former team PR employee threw gas on the fire when he intimated that Brown's massive success was simply and exclusively due to the presence of the 2-time Super Bowl champ delivering him all those balls. Brown responded with his first public acknowledgement to the world of his discontent in Western Pennsylvania. He'd delete that tweet, but this is the internet where nothing is forever. No putting that toothpaste back in the tube. Roethlisberger tried to downplay the situation, showering Brown with praise and writing any antics off as a byproduct of his passion and burning desire to win. They looked to put this behind them, and the team rebounded, with a 6-game winning streak providing a comfortable cushion in the AFC North, leading into a Week 12 game in Denver. The Steelers were down a touchdown with just a minute left, But this Roethlisberger scramble set them up with a 1st and goal on the doorstep of the goal line in what should have led to a game-tying score. Instead, when Ben looked Brown's way on this 3rd down, his toss was plucked out of the air by D-lineman Shelby Harris. As he's wont to do, Ben took to the radio to publicly broadcast his blame of the wideout, and while he was at it, voiced his belief that they should have just thrown 4 straight times to Juju Smith-Schuster. Brown shrugged it off as constructive criticism that he wasn't taking personally, while Ben spoke to the media in front of his locker and dug in on his stance, defending his unorthodox and antagonizing methods.
You have to know how to motivate different guys in different ways, and I think that's part of being a leader, being a captain. Sometimes you have to be honest with them, and so I think that I've earned the right to be able to do that with as long as I've been here.
Everything was falling apart, and it showed on the field. After that painful loss in Denver, the Steelers dropped 3 of their next 4, putting themselves on the ropes and their playoff chances, which looked like a certainty a month earlier, on life support. Then all hell broke loose, starting with the Wednesday leading up to that final game of the 2018 season. Former NFL wide receiver James Jones reported on NFL Network that Roethlisberger would consistently agitate Brown, and it reached a boiling point when Brown allegedly ran the wrong route in a walkthrough practice, and Ben demanded they replace him with someone else. An irate Brown then chucked the ball at Roethlisberger before storming out of practice. Hashing things out would also be tricky with the apparent lack of trust and respect Brown had for his signal caller. While head coach Mike Tomlin tried to excuse Brown's absence by making up a phony knee injury, there was no keeping a lid on this brewing circus. Brown would go completely AWOL ahead of their biggest game of the season, skipping the entire week of practice, including a Saturday walkthrough and their team meeting that night. Yet he somehow was under the impression that he'd still take the field and play the next day, and when he didn't, he left the stadium at halftime. They wound up missing the playoffs despite losing only 2 of their first 10 games, just the 4th time that's been done since the NFL's 1978 expansion to a 16-game regular season. Ben then did his final radio segment of the season, and while he said some nice things about his wideout, he also made sure to point out that Brown wasn't returning any of his texts or calls. About 7 weeks later, things reached DEFCON 1. See, Ben Roethlisberger had been accused of committing sexual assault both in 2008 as well as in 2010. And in mid-February, Brown had liked a pair of tweets that alluded to Ben getting away with these despicable allegations. If there were ever any chance before that these two could bury the hatchet and move forward, this was the match that burned any and all remaining bridges between Brown and his quarterback. But Brown didn't stop there. The very next day, he took to social media to accuse Ben of having an owner's mentality, that he can call out anybody he pleases with no means of recourse anyone can take. Their GM, Kevin Colbert, was totally cool with it too, even enabling that dynamic, and alluded to Ben's 52 teammates as kids, which only served to underscore and validate Brown's point. Running back Le'Veon Bell, fresh off signing a long-sought multi-year deal with the Jets, explained that doing things Ben's way was tough, and that management allowed him to become larger than the team. The final straw came with the March 1st airing of an episode of The Shop, a talk show produced by LeBron James, in which Brown executed a rapid-fire verbal assault on Ben.
You know, oh yeah, the good dude called me out, we lose a game. He like, damn, AB should have ran the better route.
Why would Ben do that?
That's the type of guy he is. He feel like he the owner. Bro, you threw this shit to the D-line, man. How the I'm gonna run the better route? You need to give me a better ball.
The very next day, an interview with ESPN's Jeff Darlington aired in which he went in some more on Ben and their relationship.
I would have liked for me and Ben to be cool, you know what I mean? I thought we was cool, but when I think, I've been in his house one time, he been in my house one time, you know what I mean? We don't work out in the off season. It's like, yo, if we really want to win, you think that's winning? That's not winning. That's not winning culture.
For Roethlisberger, the man who was never bashful about speaking his mind and sparking controversy on the radio, had pretty much gone totally silent, with nothing left to do but sit and wait for the end to come. And he didn't have to wait long. A week later, Brown's wish for a divorce from Ben and the Steelers was granted when they flipped him to the Raiders. Problems that could have seemingly been hashed out behind closed doors were instead exacerbated when taken public. Ben perceived his star wide receiver to be too hot-tempered, erratic, and sloppy. Brown thought the 2 rings won by his star quarterback somehow managed to make his head even bigger, and felt slighted by a lack of respect from his QB while resenting the deference the organization showed to Ben. Things quickly spiraled out of control when the two were forced to coexist as teammates. Now, that's ancient history.